horses. First up is someone who's been with us before on WBAI. I'm happy to welcome her back, Edita Birnkrant, Executive Director of NYCLASS, which is an advocacy group that's been at the forefront of the campaign to ban horse-drawn carriages in New York City. Edita, welcome back to Animal Matters.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me back again.
Let's just jump right into it because obviously you and I connected to book the show, and then another incident happened. The video that we all saw of the horse galloping quickly through Central Park. Bring us up to date on this incident and then the other one that recently happened, the recent tragic death of a carriage horse in Midtown.
Right. So, once again, another horse spooked, went wild, and created near deaths in the park. On Labor Day, a young horse named Bambi spooked, as many horses do, because these are nervous prey animals whose hardwired instinct is to run when they're frightened. And the truth is that virtually anything can frighten a horse and spook them, which is why it happens so often. So unfortunately, Bambi took off with the carriage driver, I believe, flung to the ground, and the passengers stuck, trapped in that carriage as she ran at top speed, actually over metal poles and into garbage cans. She took off the park drive into the grass. We heard from a witness who told a terrifying story of Bambi taking off at top speed directly into a baby shower that was happening, a party that was happening on the grass. The pregnant woman was laid out getting her picture taken, and just within a split second, got out of the way of being trampled. And dozens of other people also had to run for their lives. The passengers in the carriage actually had to jump out to save themselves. It is just pure luck that no one was seriously injured or killed. Remember that when an 1,800-pound horse runs wild, there's no way to stop them. Bambi ended up crashing into another parked carriage, and it traumatized and terrified people in the park. And this is just another example of why we simply can no longer have this public safety risk in our park, in our city streets in Midtown. It just doesn't belong here anymore. And that's precisely why last month the Central Park Conservancy came out very strongly for the first time and said, you know what? We're the experts for Central Park. We manage the park. We know the park better than anyone, and the park's uses have evolved over the years, and we no longer can have horse-drawn carriages because of the public safety risk, because the drivers routinely violate the laws, putting the public in harm's way. Manure is all over the park drives. The roads are damaged from the carriages. There's just so many reasons, but the public safety risk can no longer be ignored. We should not wait until someone is dead, and that will happen eventually. Every day, these horses are out in traffic or in the crowded park. We're gambling with people's lives. And New Yorkers are angry. That's why 71% of polled New Yorkers want this cruelty shut down. It's time.
Oh, and let me just step back for a moment because I did mention Rider's Law in the introduction for anyone who's not familiar with that. And we've had, I believe, if he's still the main sponsor of this, New York City Council member Robert Holden, we've had him on this show before.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little about Rider's Law and what it would do?
Right. So Rider's Law is really just a common sense law that would solve this problem that should have been solved long ago. It would essentially phase out the licensing for the horse-drawn carriages, and it would provide a provision for a workforce training program, workforce development program for any of the workers in the horse carriage business that need new employment. And it has a provision for the current horses in the industry to be retired to safe, loving sanctuaries and rescue farms that have been lined up through a network of horse farms so that they can finally run free. Look, horses are meant to run, right? They're meant to run free, but they can't do that in New York City because when they do, tragedies happen. And we want them to just be living free on pasture, on grass as they're meant to. Look, horses are herd and grazing animals. They evolved to live in groups, be on pasture every day, grazing constantly. And that isn't an optional thing for their health, it's essential. But carriage horses in New York City are denied all that. They have no pasture, they're not on grass ever. They spend the time when they're not pulling a carriage locked up in tiny warehouse stalls on the upper levels of buildings, never touching grass, never grazing, never free to move. And when they are moving, it's when they're chained up, attached to a heavy carriage with a painful metal bit in their mouth that's an instrument of pain used to control them, and a whip. This is cruelty. There's no other way to say it. And that's why the majority of New Yorkers and many, many tourists that we speak with and who reach out to us agree with this. The pedicabs giving tours of the park are far more popular than the horse-drawn carriages because the videos of these horses running wild, collapsing and dropping dead, these go viral, and people around the world see these videos, and they don't want to risk their lives taking a carriage from another century that has no safety precautions of any kind or protocols, or a horse that might drop dead. They know these horses are not well. They know that sickly, even dying horses are just thrown on the streets with no proper veterinary care, no oversight, and just worked to death in many instances.
So, and Adita, supporters of the carriage horses will they say that they're well cared for. There are specific regulations that are in place to ensure that they are treated properly. But why do you argue that these protections are insufficient?
Right. Well, let's be clear. The carriage industry is essentially self-regulated. The only veterinarians approving these horses to work or even looking at them are paid directly by the carriage owners. That's why we see elderly horses with cancer, like Ryder, given a clean bill of health, perfectly clean bill of health, a 26-year-old horse riddled with cancer. And Lady, the horse who dropped dead just last month, also a perfectly clean bill of health. We see horses every day with leg lameness, meaning untreated injuries, agonizing hoof problems, untreated diseases. They are all given a clean bill of health by the vets that work for the owners. There's no outside independent oversight. So what we have now is this sort of sham system that protects the carriage owners, not the animals and not the public. It's not, there's no oversight. It's simply cruelty. It's a danger to everyone. Most of these horses we see out there on the streets should already be retired, never should have been approved to work in New York City in the first place. And they're suffering every day on the streets of New York City. We see it every day. We often have horse experts, horse trainers going out with us. They're in disbelief that horses in such bad shape are are being forced to pull carriages 10 hours a day in such inhumane conditions, in pain with every step often. I mean, just imagine an animal that is in agonizing pain with untreated leg injuries and foot problems, forced to pound the pavement 10 hours a day, and then just to go back to a tiny concrete stall, never touching grass. That's heartbreaking for us and for so many people in New York, around the world. We are flooded with messages of support and, frankly, disbelief that this is still going on in New York City when so many cities around the world have already shut it down. Even recently, San Antonio, Texas, actually voted to ban horse carriages, which is wonderful. And it just shows that New York City is so stuck in the quicksand here with having this still go on. We had the Chicago banned horse carriages. Mumbai, India replaced all the horse carriages with electric carriages. Barcelona, London, Paris, Toronto, Montreal. The list is so long of cities around the world. And New York City, really, we need to get this done. And that is our goal at NYCLASS, to get this done. These horses have suffered enough. They deserve the mercy to live the rest of their lives as horses are meant to, running free, grazing on pasture. And actually, NYCLASS has rescued several horses from slaughter. Unfortunately, there's no protection in the carriage industry. They have no retirement plan for these horses. They're just discarded. Last year, we helped rescue a horse named Bernard that ended up at a slaughter auction, was going to be sent to slaughter because they just threw Bernard away. He was severely lame. He had very bad leg injuries and other ailments in a deep, deep state of neglect. And that again is further proof that there is no real oversight going on because all of the horses who have been rescued from slaughter or that were discarded, they are all in terrible, terrible shape, deep states of neglect to the point that it should be considered criminal animal cruelty.
And if you just tune in, you're listening to Animal Matters on WBAI 99.5 FM New York, also streaming live at WBAI.org. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons. I'm talking with Edita Birnkrant, Executive Director of NYCLASS. You mentioned a number of other areas, a number of other cities and jurisdictions where carriage horses have been banned. Why has this taken so long? I mean, Bob Holden has trumpeted this issue for some time on the city council, but why then, in your view, is this not move forward? Because I seem to recall an earlier mayoral election when this was, NYCLASS was out there. There's a lot more visibility for your campaign, and I'm wondering also about any connections with the current mayoral candidates and their stances on this, because I'd love our listeners to know.
Well, the answer to why it hasn't ended yet is an age-old problem, political corruption. And probably your listeners are very familiar with that, especially in New York City. So unfortunately, there's a union, the Transport Workers Union, acting unethically and representing the interests of the wealthy carriage owners who are have an interest in keeping their cash only business going that appears to be misclassifying their workers as independent contractors. There's no worker protections for these drivers. If they were to get injured, they're not eligible for workers' comp, unemployment, anything like that. And they're representing the interests of wealthy business owners who want to keep their business going, not the interests of the workers who, frankly, have told the media in many cases they don't even make enough money to pay their bills because the carriages are declining in popularity because of how obvious it is that this is an unsafe, cruel business. So, unions are very powerful in New York City. And unfortunately, this union is acting, we believe, unethically in trying to block the legislation in the city council. And we actually have had council members who we know are compassionate people and who support our other important legislation like Flacco's laws tell us privately that the reason they're not signing on publicly is because they don't want to be bullied by Transport Workers Union. And a good example of their level of bullying is recently the Transport Workers Union has spent a fortune in union dues to viciously attack Council Member Eric Botcher, who's a strong supporter of Riders Law. His district is where the stables are, where the horses operate. They've taken out numerous full-page ads in the New York Post, creating fake AI images to viciously attack Eric Botcher, who's a wonderful, compassionate man. And it's just bullying tactics, frankly, Trumpian bullying tactics. And we're pushing through that, though. I think, the momentum has reached such a point that that kind of political corruption can no longer be an excuse because we cannot wait until people are killed. And just 6 days ago, we came within split seconds of people being trampled, seriously injured, or killed. And this is going to keep happening, both in the park and on the streets, because as I said from the beginning, horses are prey animals with a deep wired flight instinct. When they are frightened, they are going to run, and nobody's going to stop them when they start running until they crash. And in fact, if you look at the actual manual for the carriage drivers, it gives a list of all the things that can spook a horse. And you know what's on that list? Basically everything that makes New York City, New York City. Loud noises, crowds, an umbrella opening, a manhole cover, a plastic bag going by. Everything that makes New York City, New York City can spook a horse at any moment. And that's why we cannot allow this any longer in 2025. And I just want to say that I know that, Christina Hansen is going to be coming on after me, and she is the spokesperson for the carriage industry. She's a carriage driver herself. And I know by now that her favorite talking point is that Frederick Law Olmsted designed Central Park to be seen from the back of a horse-drawn carriage, and therefore horses should be kept forever. But you know what? It's a tired line, and it's honestly absurd. In 1858, when the park was created, horses were the primary mode of transportation. So, of course, the park accommodated them. But let's look back to 1858. Back then, the park drives were dirt. Cars came later, and then the drives were paved in 1913. The park has always adapted. Did you know that bicycles were once even banned in Central Park, and now they're central to millions, how millions of people enjoy the park? Central Park has never been frozen in amber. Horse slaughter on New York City streets was an everyday occurrence in 1858. Smoking in Central Park was considered fashionable. Today, it's banned. In 1858, child labor was routine. Now it's outlawed. Dogfighting and cockfighting were popular in New York City in 1858. Now they're felonies. For decades, the public was allowed to drive their cars through Central Park until the city banned it for safety. I mean, as recently as 2017, the city council banned wild animals in circuses, and Ringling Brothers shut down, and then they rebranded with no animals at all. And this shows that traditions evolve because society evolves. Um,
So,
yeah.
oh, and Edita, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I just want to come back to because I threw a lot into one question earlier.
Right.
Where are mayoral candidates stand, or at least the remaining mayoral candidates, where they stand on this? Are you seeing any hope from any of them?
Well, I think I will say that I think we're going to have some news on that coming out. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation around that. We're not at liberty to, I'm not at liberty to say right now, but I do think that that is going to be a part of this conversation and the mayoral election in the coming weeks.
Okay, and and I will be able to report on that on a future episode. Let me just throw out a final question to you. Is there room for a compromise here? You are fixed on your opinion and your stance, and the TW is on theirs. Is there room for compromise?
Uh, I think that time is long over. There were compromises offered in the past to the carriage industry in previous administrations, and they rejected all of them. We're at the point now that we know the majority of New Yorkers want these horse carriages gone. The Central Park Conservancy that manages the park, knows the park better than anyone, has said this is a public safety risk. We need to protect the park goers. We need to protect the park's infrastructure. It has to go. There's no compromise because compromising and waiting means gambling with more lives. Uh, we cannot overstate the fact that horses are nervous prey animals. They will spook. It's going to keep happening. It has happened dozens of times already. And eventually our luck will run out. And we don't want to wait for human tragedies. We don't want to wait for more horses to collapse and drop dead, like Lady just last month, exactly a month ago. This horse was only in New York City for a few weeks, and she collapsed and dropped dead, a gruesome death in front of horrified New Yorkers. This is going to keep happening. It has to end. I mean, look around the world at the fact that so many cities around the world have already shut this down. New York City is supposed to be a leader, but we are so behind here. This is what the public wants. This is what New Yorkers want. This is what the Conservancy wants. This is the right thing to do, both for protecting the welfare of these horses who have no say in the matter and who are in harm's way every day. As I said, many are suffering with every step they take. And to protect the park, to protect the millions of people who visit the park every year. Let's remember, like 42 million visitors a year, and the uses and the park has evolved over the years. And we trust the Central Park Conservancy, which has done an incredible job of being a steward for the 843 acres of this park. They know better than anyone, what we need to do to keep Central Park the top tourist destination and to protect the interests of the millions of people who visit the park every year. So there's no time for compromise because animals are suffering, people are nearly losing their lives, and this is quite simply just the right thing to do. And we have very common sense legislation in Riders Law. I encourage all our listeners who live in New York City, contact your city council member. Riders Law is actually intro 8967 is the number. It'll take 2 minutes, reach out to your council member, phone call, email. And if you're a listener who doesn't live in New York City, you can contact Speaker Adrienne Adams, who is unfortunately currently blocking the legislation. She's going to need a little more pressure from the public to do the right thing here and not do the bidding of a union who is, quite frankly, behaving her in such an unethical, shocking manner. I'm at a loss for words, but
And Edita, only because I'm going to have to wrap up the segment, but I just wanted to make sure that you gave your website because if anyone wants to learn more about NYCLASS, where they should go.
yeah, they should go to nyclass.org, NYCLASS.org. Follow us on Instagram at NYClass. And if we just have a moment, I want to say before Christina comes on that this recent tragic spooking incident in the park on Labor Day, Christina Hansen lied about why this happened. The driver lied. Every witness who spoke to the police and who we spoke with and others spoke with said that there was no garbage truck that caused this spooking incident. It was a horse that spooked because they spook for any reason, but there was no wrongdoing on the part of the truck driver that happened to be in the park at the time. This is what every witness has said. There was an investigation done by the NYPD. So if you hear lies coming on after me, please understand that Christina Hansen is essentially a paid liar. She is a carriage driver who has justified any and all cruelty and abuse. There's always an excuse. There's never responsibility taken when these horrible things happen. It's always about blaming everyone else, but this is on them. This cruelty,
Okay.
public danger needs to end. Don't believe the lies. Listen to the
Okay.
Conservancy, listen to every animal welfare group that says this cruelty needs to end.
Edita, thank you so much for joining me today. And folks, you'll be able to hear from Christina in the second half of the show coming up shortly. Edita Birnkrant, thank you so much for joining us here on Animal Matters today.
Thank you so much.
And folks, before I take a break, I just want to remind you why we're here. We're here because animals cannot pick up the phone. They can't write a check. They can't log on to a website.